Hi, everybody. This is Jim Prusak, physical therapist from the Pain PT. Thanks for being here today. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We'll keep putting out more free content. I have a success story here today, and I always love to bring success stories because they're so powerful and helpful. So I have Allie here today. Allie, how are you doing?
Doing good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I know we just chatted off air for a moment, just how helpful it is, these success stories and how it helped you as well. So to be able to give back is like such a rewarding thing. So I do appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
thank
I'm
you.
gonna turn it over to you and have you just share your story with what you went through and where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. My chronic pain story, I had pain in my ankle and I had it for 10 years. Started in 2011. I was 22 years old. I was just finished my first year of grad school. Um, and I was a runner. And at this point in my life, fitness was really important to me. A few years earlier, like in high school, I was overweight and I had lost 60 pounds. That was like part of my identity was, having lost the weight and being active and running. So just kind of on a run, my inner ankle started to ache one day. Kind of maybe back off a little bit. Then a few days later, go on a run again, came back, hurt a little more.
And
Did
you
that.
weren't like at that point doing any additional training. You were just doing your daily runs. It wasn't like you were running like extra miles, like from a physical perspective.
No, no. I ran probably 4 days a week, and my runs would be anywhere from like 4 to 12 miles. But yeah, it wasn't like I was increasing or I wasn't training for anything. Like running was just kind of something I did for fun. So it just kind of started aching, and I'd back off and take some days off, and that lasted about 3 months. And so that was like August, and I remember it was October when I went on what was, at that point my last run, and the pain just kept escalating despite backing off. And I finally kind of said, okay, I'm going to go see a doctor, get this looked at. So I went to originally the doctor at my university, and she said probably a stress fracture. And pretty quickly kind of got into that kind of like the undertone of mental health, but from an aspect of shame. She says I running was such a part of my life when she said 6 to 8 weeks of no running. So I was 22, and that was very upsetting to me. And she kind of made comments about like that basically it wasn't healthy and my running wasn't healthy, and that I, kind of comment
Mm.
like eating disorder type comments because I was so upset that I couldn't run. Um, but
Mhm. So
not
it
from a
wasn't very helpful though, her, the way she communicated that to you was very in a very negative way, it sounds like.
yes, and I think throughout being treated for chronic pain, anytime anyone would bring up anything related to mental health, it wasn't helpful. It was from a place of like, yeah, like a place of shame. So yeah, she originally said stress fracture, and the MRI did not or originally like the X-ray, no stress fracture, the MRI, no stress fracture. Um, I switched, so I had my university insurance and insurance through my parents with Kaiser. So I was in Las Vegas, and my parents are in Southern California. So I ended up just kind of going home and going to Kaiser.
Hmm.
And that's when they said tendonitis, or more specific, like tenosynovitis, right? Where it's like the sheath of the tendon that was supposedly inflamed was the source of the pain. Um, and that's the diagnosis that stuck. So Kaiser did, the standard like wear the boot for 6 weeks and do physical therapy and take, anti-inflammatory medication, um, which none of it worked. And
You
pretty
did that, so you did all that for that period of time.
correct,
Okay.
correct. Yep, the standard treatment for, tendonitis. None of it worked. And the Kaiser doctor very quickly jumped to tendon transfer surgery was his recommendation.
My goodness.
Yeah, very, very quickly. And so the tendon that they diagnosed as being inflamed, it's the posterior tibial tendon. So which was another theme which would come up when I'd see doctors, was that this is not a runner's injury. Like what they would say we tend to see with this tendon is it's like elderly, overweight, high heels are the things that are associated, and then this tendon stretches out and it drops your arch and your foot falls apart, and you have to take the tendon from the other part of the foot, put it in that, and like use screws and rebuild the foot.
Sounds
So
terrible. That's
yes, and you know, at 22, I was told if you're
and
already having
scary,
issues,
right?
if you're already having issues with this tendon, this is your future. Like at some point, this foot is going to fall apart. You're going to have it rebuilt. The other one's probably going to fall apart too because this is your body. Um,
Yeah, it's just that messaging people don't understand. I don't think, and well-meaning physicians and other medical people, that you're just, noceboing, what I would call it, people putting those
yes,
things into people's minds.
yes, absolutely. And I was, you know, even just on Google, I was able to see that a tendon transfer was an extreme recommendation to go to so quickly. Um, because I was, you know, I was like, ooh, I need a second opinion. And that's where, because I had the university insurance, which was accepted kind of anywhere, I was able to go see a different doctor, which is kind of where it got to the point where I saw, over the course of a few years, I saw very many um, orthopedic, you know, foot and ankle specialists, and you know, had, you know, a very supportive parents, and well resourced enough to go to many different places in different states to seek out who's the best at this. And
Yeah,
you know, because I'm young, and I went from running 10 miles to, I can't, like, my boyfriend's doing the grocery shopping because it hurts and I'm in pain
yeah.
all of the time. Um, and it was, you know, seeing all of the physicians, the foot and ankle specialists, just really the same thing, where I'd come in and they'd look at me and they'd be like, this is probably tendonitis. Like, you probably have an accurate diagnosis, but I need a fresh MRI. You know, I can't really tell you exactly what's going on without the MRI. And then they'd get the MRI and they'd call me and say, the tendon's definitely inflamed. That's definitely the source of your pain. Um,
So they all
do
kind of
the
said that. They all, and once to get them, a lot of people, practitioners, said the same thing. So they were telling you this is the the tibial
yes,
tendon. Yep.
yes, this is the, it's very clearly tendonitis. Here's the treatment, which was more or less the same treatment everywhere, like the boot, the rest, physical therapy exercises, although they all would kind of have, let me throw in this new physical therapy exercise that might be the difference.
How many
Um,
times did you do that cycle of the boot and all the stuff? Did you do that multiple times?
yeah, multiple times over the course of 3 years, maybe 5 to 7 times. I was in a boot
Wow.
for varying lengths. I did have surgery in 2012. Um, and that was, so this was kind of in the middle of that process of seeing different doctors. So I did get one cortisone shot that didn't affect anything. I did get PRP once that didn't affect anything. And in 2012, I had like a less extreme surgery. So, like, a cleaning out the tendon,
Yeah.
um, which made it substantially worse.
Mm.
Um, Substantially worse. Probably for 8 or 9 months at that point, I was in more pain than I had been the day before I got the surgery.
Mm.
Eventually got back to the same level of pain, but
Yeah.
definitely, you
But
know,
no improvement from that.
no, yeah, no improvement from that. And you know, one thing with pain stories like mine is the idea of like structural pain, and how clear my symptoms were that this was structural pain. If I was able to not walk for, you know what I mean? Like, if I could just take it easy for a few weeks and stay home, I had very, very little pain. Like, I could get it to a very low level. And anytime I had something where it's a surprise and I have to park really far and I end up walking a lot more than I expected, my pain would like shoot through the roof, and it was a dull ache,
Yeah. So you
so
had like in your story, it's interesting. You had all the consistent findings that this is the problem, the same ones. So you're just like, okay. And you saw very mechanical things too, like, oh, if I rest better, if I do more, it gets worse. So in a way, it's very, at the time, very easy to say this is a physical issue, right?
yes, yes, and I think every single doctor that I saw, like orthopedic, like, yep, this is. But then when it didn't work, they would kind of, again, like with that I saw at first, it was very like, I think you're stressed out. I think it's just
Hmm.
grad school and like this works. So because you're not healing, you don't have tendonitis. But you showed me on the scan that I had tendon, like everything in the beginning, everything about that diagnostic session, you were like, yep, definitely tendonitis, definitely a structural problem. I can definitely fix this. And
Hmm.
then when it didn't fix, it was very clear, like, you are an annoyance to me.
Yeah,
Like,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah,
That's the
go
problem. I mean,
away. Yeah.
it's like they don't know what else to do. And so,
Yes.
but like you said, I would imagine, well, tell us in the audience, how did that affect you just going from one doctor or one practitioner to the next and them just telling that to you at the end? How did it make you feel?
I mean, it's awful. And I think going from, being a runner and that, like, just activity, like, I love to be active, just that was like my joy, my favorite thing, to, I mean, really, the level of pain, it was like a disability that's not a documented disability, and being in pain is miserable, like you just feel awful, and then going to doctors and the cycle of like hope, and then just like the crushing of like, no, this is my life, is this ever going to end? It
Yeah.
might not. I did also at that time start having some really severe, like, no, not severe, but like gastric symptoms. Like, I lost a lot of weight and I was burping, and I had, they diagnosed like ulcer. I had some of the endoscopy type, and they'd always ask, do you think this could be stress? And in those appointments, I would say yes. I do. Like, I think that the
So at that point,
gastritis.
you were personally, because you had all these doctors saying, and they eventually say, "Oh, you're stressed out." Did you at during that time start to think or believe that this could be stress related, or you were still kind of thinking, "Oh, maybe it had some impact, but not really"?
Well, my ankle, no, I did not think stress was a factor at all. My like gastritis and my digestive symptoms, I fully believed were stress, but I thought that it, like, the stress of not being able to walk, the stress of constantly being in and out of orthopedic doctors is probably causing my digestive issue. And it was like, you know what I mean? And my GI doctors were, yeah, this is probably stress related. There's only so much we can do. I also remember, because of my ankle issues lasted for a while, they would refer me to like pain specialists. And like, I would get the recommendation to go on like heavy painkillers. And because I had stomach issues, that was the biggest reason. I do not want to take something that's going to tear up my digestive system. And
Hmm.
I would say things like I'm in my early 20s. I don't want to be on these pain meds for the rest of my life and just tear up my digestive system and get used to them and get worse. Um, and I would say, if I pop these pills, can I go run 10 miles tomorrow? Of course not. So this doesn't solve the problem. Because I could sit still and do nothing, and my pain is very manageable. And it doesn't make sense to take painkillers to be able to walk a little further with a little less pain. And the pain management doctors would get very frustrated with me when I would say I didn't want to, you clearly don't want to get better. Your pain's clearly
Wow.
not that bad. you're lucky you don't have a terminal illness. You're just here with something in your ankle. I just, yeah.
Really, really terrible. I mean, what people, I've always, when I hear a lot of this, I always think back. I've always said I wanted to teach a course for physicians and other people to really be careful what you tell people. I mean, you heard so many sound like horrible things, it sounds like, from medical professionals who, right, just don't know what to do with you and they just dismiss you or put you down, or like you said, just you don't want to get better, take these pain pills. I mean, God, have you been
Yeah.
read the research, doctor, about pain pills? I mean, come on. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, I think of the, some of the books, I forget Maya Dusenberry, you know, writing about like the experience of women in the medical system. And it's like, you know,
Mm.
like a lot of the kind of one I would get is like, you don't look like you're in pain. Like I was very young and I looked fit, you know, so like, you don't look like you're in pain. You're fine. Yeah. The awareness of the impact of like a, you know, usually male orthopedic physician or a pain management doctor, like speaking to, you know, 20, 30
Yeah.
years older than me, speaking to me in this way when I'm young and I'm going through something that's just so life changing was like rough. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah,
It's
yeah,
terrible, really. And that, again, that does impact, right? I'm sure it impacted you with how you felt and also with how you felt in your body too, emotionally, physically, mentally.
yeah, definitely. And I basically, so it was like 2011 through the end of 2014. I had like one doctor, you know, another expert in this field that I went to, and, you know, same old kind of. And I just, I was like, I can't, like, I'm done. I have, like, I've accepted to a certain degree, like, I am accepting that this is my life, or if the solution's out there, I cannot drag myself through this to find it
Mm.
anymore. So at that point, I decided that I was done seeking medical treatment and I was just going to do the best I could, with, you know, living my life. I like kind of taught myself how to lap swim. Like I knew how to swim, but I didn't know how to lap, like, you know, freestyle like lap swim. So I figured out lap swim so I could do some type of fitness. And I was also like kind of like Pilates, things that were a little bit like less weight bearing.
Yeah,
I,
less
you know, kind of,
impact.
yeah, so pivoted my fitness. And, you know, like we were talking about, like I was in my 20s, so there were a lot of things that was just crushing. Like I couldn't go to a concert if it was standing. I really
Mm.
couldn't travel because travel's not fun when you're in pain, you know. But I just kind of like let go, like these, you know, I'm not going to spend my money on travel because I'm not going to enjoy it, and it is
So
what it
so
is.
the
And I,
pain and the condition still had a lot of control over your life and what you could do.
yes, it did. But I was just, I'm done seeing doctors. So that was 2014. And then for quite a few years, that was just kind of my life. I had my son in 2016. And I think for like from like a chronic pain perspective, that kind of, I mean, not having a baby is never good for anyone's mental health, but it like shifted the perspective of my life where I wasn't just like someone in my 20s who couldn't do what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Like I was a mother and I had purpose, and like I can, you know, like if I go to the park and chase him around and I have pain, it's not just like, oh, why do you have pain? It's like, well, I guess I was a mom and this is my life and I'm, you know, living with my, you know, my son. And in so kind of flash forward to 2020, I separated. My marriage ended, and obviously that's, you know, kind of very impactful, and just kind of initiated a process of like changing the way I saw the world and being open to new things, and, you know, kind of focusing on my mental health and looking back at my past through like a different lens. So, but, you know, I'm
You just
still
had your
still in.
one, you had your one child at that point too. Okay.
Correct, correct, yeah. So then in summer of 2021, so about like 10 years after my pain started, I had a pain flare where, you know, over the course of the years where I wasn't seeking treatment, I would have times where I still had pain, I still had disability, but it was like manageable. And then I would have times where it would flare and I would like be in a ton of pain. So in the summer of 2021, I was like, I had a severe pain flare that lasted for a while. Like I was using Instacart because going to the grocery store, and I joined a gym. Like I was doing just like at home workouts specifically. Like I have a pole, so I would do like pole fitness kind of during the pandemic. And then I joined a gym again because there weren't like Pilates classes at 6 a.m., the time that I needed. Still, because it's 2020, things are still kind of, shut down and limited. So I think like going to the gym kind of like is associated with that pain flare. So now I'm like, oh, I can't go to the gym and do my grocery shopping in the same day. And I really do want to get a little bit of like, but it wasn't like high impact exercise either. It was just
Yeah.
weightlifting, but just the walking around the gym, I think had my brain thinking that my ankle was in danger. But I, like reading different things and exposing myself to new ideas. And I actually read like Joe Dispenza, and that kind of was like, okay, maybe there's something out there that
Mm.
maybe change is possible. Like maybe I
That was your
don't have
first sort of idea that maybe something could shift.
exactly. Maybe there's an answer out there. And obviously, being that I'm here, it's not like I just went into a meditation and changed who I was and came out and my ankle's better. But it really,
Right.
he talks a lot about neuroplasticity. So I really just, between the pain flare and just being in a different place in my life, I got back into that place I was when I initially got hurt, where like I can be like obsessive, right? So I'm like, I kind of constantly Googling, constantly trying to figure out different combinations, different words, different ideas, like what can I do? Like maybe the answer is there. Maybe it wasn't there 10 years ago and it is now. Like but I don't want to see doctors because of all
Yeah.
of that stress, but like on my own, like what can I find? And I Googled like, because of like Joe Dispenza, I Googled like neuroplasticity and, things like that. And that like started seeing articles about TMS. And I had heard of that back when I was initially in my pain. But I
Okay.
remember one thing was like how, like we talked about how qualitatively structural my pain was. Really back then, I think there was less research, less knowledge about TMS and how the structural pain can still be coming from the brain. So at that point, I was like, oh, I've heard of this, and this isn't me. Like I don't have that tingly nerve moves around pain. And then I saw Nicole, the Cure for Chronic Pain, her
Yeah.
YouTube, watched her intro videos, and she says, she's like, are you open to like new ideas and alternate? And I'm like, absolutely. Like at this point, yes. Like
You were ready.
anything,
Yeah.
anything's on the table. And she makes it like there's a sentence where she says, think back to what you were going through when the pain first happened. And just like my whole world, like upside down. Because so kind of to go back and tie in, and I'm not going to get super in the weeds with this story because that's a whole separate thing. But I had like dyspareunia in painful sex from my first initial sexual experience. So I was put on birth control at age 13 for acne. I think that caused a pretty severe hormonal imbalance. Also coming from a background that was very sex negative, and women, shouldn't enjoy sex, and, sex is something that a woman does as like a thank you for her partner committing, that type of heteronormative old school logic. So my ex-husband, who, we were best friends, we got along, we had a very strong partnership, but he was the only person I had been with, and it was always painful. And it was just this constant source of stress to be in a, heterosexual sexual relationship, but it's always miserably painful every time. But I'm stressed, like I have to do this to stay in my relationship.
And you
Like,
kept that to yourself basically during that time too? Was it something that you seeked out treatment for, or did you keep it to yourself?
so, I mean, so obviously my partner knew that this was miserable. You know,
Sure.
it wasn't like I went to a gynecologist once and brought it up, and they kind of do that. Well, how painful is it? Like, you're young, you know. So
Yeah.
she brushed it off, and I didn't at that point, I didn't have a desire to heal that for me. Like, I wasn't, you know, coming from the background and the mental, like, just the narrative that I was spinning in my head. I wasn't like, oh, I want to heal my painful sex so that I can enjoy it. It was like, I want to be a functioning girlfriend. Like, right? Like, how, like, I
Right, right,
want,
right.
yeah, like, so yeah, so I didn't seek treatment because it would have further, because that would have had to have come from a desire to get into the weeds with that and to heal the hormone imbalance and to heal the mental health issues. And I had no desire to heal my mental health issues around sex. I just wanted to make my partner happy.
Right.
Um, yeah, so basically, I can, and that's, you know, I like looking back at me being now in my mid 30s, and there's so much more information about like sexual health and about, you know, like alternates to being in a heterosexual relationship. Like, I could have been in a asexual relate, you know what I mean? Like, which probably would have been a better fit for me at
Yeah.
21, but none of those felt like, so now I can look back and see 8 different alternates. Like, I see all these doors out of the like box that I was living in.
Yeah.
But back then, I wanted a family, I wanted a partner, I wanted to, so, and all I have to do is like endure this. And
But you carried on, like you just kind of, like you said, you just carried on. And, but like
yeah,
you said, you kind of suffered internally, and it really did, it was a major stressor for you. It's
yeah. And one thing, so I feel like I was very, very impacted by that, but was denying that I was impacted by that. And in my divorce, like it bubbled up. It bubbled up later. Like, I it kind of like that resentment for, you know, my co-parent is like a wonderful person. We have a wonderful co-parenting relationship, but still being in that relationship with him, like, I grew to like hate him and kind of, you know, like, even if we're, you know, like at the movies, like, don't touch me, you know, just like all these mental
mm,
health issues around having endured painful sex for so long.
right.
Um, so because I had already divorced and I had already admitted to myself how severely impacted I was by that relationship, when I watched that video, I was able to connect. The pain start came on shortly after we moved in together.
Mm,
So I had taken this really awful stressor and just like brought it home, and that was my home life and living through that. So like I can look back at that and see like, oh, that time was really like impactful on my mental health. And I was enduring this thing quietly, privately, miserable, hiding it. And that's probably, you know, time wise, like connecting to this work.
connecting the dots. Yeah. It's so hard
That's
to
where this came from.
see that, right? I mean, that's a highlight that too. It's like, if you didn't know this work come across, it's really, that's really hard for someone to piece together, right? Especially
Yeah.
mechanical condition. But like you said, in retrospect, if you look at the big picture, which we want to look at, it made sense, right?
Yes. And if I had been exposed to this work in 2018, when I was still like deeply denying, like, my marriage is perfect, I'm so happy, this works for me, like, if I was still in that phase of life, I probably could never have connected those dots and really had that belief that my structural pain could be tied to a psychological issue, because I was still denying the psychological issue. But
Right.
because I had already, you know, recognized and started to work through the psychological issue, at that point, I was like, this is me. I'm bought in. Like, this is
So when you, Nicole Sachs, when you kind of saw her working, it resonated for you and you started to make that connection, then you started to buy in a little bit more. And
That
what did
yeah.
you do? Did you start journaling, journal speak or?
So I was already a journaler. Like I was already a religious journaler. So and I think all like I was set up for success in that perspective. So really at that point, the thing for me was to believe that my pain was structural. I mean,
Mhm.
like that's something that's kind of the idea from Sarno is like once you hear what the pain's trying to tell you and you believe that it's structural, it can change really quickly. Um, and that definitely happened for me. So I started kind of like psychologically, like being a detective in terms of what are some like points, some pieces of evidence that I can take that would counteract this structural narrative that I've been building for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So one of the ones was that kind of stood out to me when I asked myself that question was that like has this gotten worse? And it hasn't gotten worse. So I was told this is a progressive condition, your foot's going to fall apart this and I'm like my foot hasn't fallen apart.
Right.
This
Your
has
arch is going to collapse. You're going to need, right,
yeah,
surgeries on the other side.
yeah, none of that happened. It continued to ache and the ache like it would get worse if I walked a lot, it would get better if I was still, but it did not progress in the nature that I was told.
Yeah.
So given all of the steps that I had walked in the past 10 years, the fact that my foot wasn't falling apart, I'm like, well, maybe walking is not harmful to me. Like maybe walking is not going to cause further damage. Like I could connect that. And the other little one that stood out quickly was, like weight bearing and walking cause pain, but I would notice things like the leg press machine, right? Like that causes pain too. And I'm like, it does. I'm not even putting weight on this really. Like I'm sitting and pushing. It doesn't make sense that this motion is really causing that much damage to my ankle that I would be in pain. And that's why I just like pulled out those details. And so what, and didn't get me, like, it took me a while to get back to no pain. I can walk literally as far as I want. But very, very quickly, within a few weeks, I was able to do my grocery shopping and go to the gym.
Amazing. And I just want to
Yeah,
highlight that because all that was a shift in your
yeah,
perception, a shift
yeah,
in your way you looked at this. And
yep,
you were looking at real evidence and trying to poke holes in the structural physical, right, realm you lived in for years. And
yes,
just want to highlight that you lived in that for years in that paradigm of
yeah,
physical structural world. And all of a sudden you're able to step out of it. And then all of a sudden you're able to walk now
right.
in a short period of time over a couple of weeks, which is pretty incredible, right?
Yeah, it really was. And like something I would also highlight to someone going through this work and like been through a similar story, it was also scary because of the hope, because it took me back to that place where I go to a new doctor and there's hope and then like the crushing disappointment. And when after a few weeks, I'm like, my life is changing. I think I have my life back, but it's only been a few weeks. And I was like, at that point, scared of the relapse, right? Like
Yeah.
scared for this to just be a coincidence.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You got
the,
crushed so many times before. You're just
yeah,
like
yeah,
anticipating, you're almost expecting it. It's too good to be true, right?
yes, yes, definitely had a this is too good to be true. One thing that I did like that I think really, really helped in those early periods was when I would feel pain, I would say like internally, kind of my like monologue would be like, hey, this is not causing structural damage. Like I would say, like brain pain, fear. I know that you think that if we keep walking, if we keep working out, my ankle is going to fall apart, but it is not.
Yeah.
Like I that was my internal monologue. Like I hear you pain, I see you pain. My body is not being damaged by this movement.
Yeah.
My
So you really
body is,
started that
yeah,
self-talk
yep,
to rebuke or refute
yep,
what the
Yep.
limbic brain, what the memory, what everything had learned up to that point, just
Yep.
kept feeding you, kept saying,
Mhm.
no, that's not true. And I just also want to ask you for the people listening that as you were getting back to walking and stuff, you still had pain at times, right? It still ramped, like you said. It wasn't just like, oh, here we go. Now I'm out of jail, right? You were still dealing
Yeah.
with pain.
Yeah. So, like I said, like immediately, it didn't go away immediately, but it faded
Yeah.
immediately over the grocery shopping, the gym, the things that I'd have to walk over the next like 3 to 6 weeks. It like incrementally went down. And when it got to a place where it was low on a day to day level, I would still, if I went outside of the norm, it
Yeah.
would shoot up. So one
Ramp
thing
up.
for me
Right.
was shoes. Like I wore Vibrams. I wore like barefoot shoes. And if I wore shoes with like structure for a long time, they would still hurt. And because I felt like my perspective was I was in it for like the long run. Like I lost 10 years of my life. Who cares if it takes another two to get back to being,
I want
because
to highlight that again, and you'll hear that in all my videos. Drop the timeline, everybody. Don't put pressure on yourself. Right at that point, you're like, I had 10 years. I don't care if
yeah,
it takes, because you had already seen some improvement. So you kind of dropped the timeline and pressure.
yeah, I was not trying to get back to running in any specific time. It was like but like because I got my day to day, like I could live my current life with very very little pain. But like to add on to it took a while. Um, but
Yeah,
it over
that's right.
time, yeah, over time, over months, I was able to like start going on like little baby hikes. Like you know what I mean? Like I could drive up to the canyon and go hike, 0.4 of a mile, and not. I'm still wearing my safety shoes, and I'm still
Yeah.
walking slow, but I could go do things like that, and just yeah, really over time, like just building that up. I did. So about a year in, or maybe like I started this in September. The following year in May, I was doing so well. I was like, so for Mother's Day, I bought myself and my son passes to Universal Studios. Um, and I went, and like the first time, like on Mother's Day, like I was in so much pain. It just
Mhm.
the big, big relapse. Um, and I just bought this pass and I was excited about it. And, I basically, you have to go twice to get your money's worth. So
Yeah.
I went a second time with a friend because we kind of made that plan. And then I did not go again. It was like a 9 month pass. And I was like, well, I broke even on this one. Like I am
Yeah.
not ready.
You
I
were
am
like,
not.
again, all excited. You're making progress and you think this is going to be great. And the actual amount of walking you did there, was it a lot more at the time, or it wasn't really more than what you had built up to?
It was more. It
Okay.
was definitely more. And Universal Studios specifically, you park really far and walk up that hit, right. So like I'm at the gate and like my pain is
There was
not
a big, at the time,
coming
it was a
back.
big jump in
Yeah, it was.
activity and movement. Okay.
It was. And because I built up so much, I felt like at that point I kind of had the feeling like I have to wear my special shoes and I can't really run and I can't, but I could probably like I didn't know if there was a limit to my steps. And
Yeah.
that was like that this is like so. And that relapse lasted probably 2 months, that I was
Wow. It really set you back. Yeah.
in constant pain and miserable. But because I had like 7 months prior of like consistent, extreme, like too good to be true progress, I was like, this, I knew it was. I didn't question the diagnosis. I didn't go
Mm.
back to, oh, there's like those fears are popping up in my brain, maybe there is something wrong, but I didn't really
Good for
believe
you.
it.
You're
I
able to still stay in your ideal. Okay, I'm still all right.
Yep.
This is a flare up. Great.
Yep.
So that's so important that you're able to do that. And like you said, it built off the previous confidence that you had established.
Yeah, and definitely like we talked about, like throwing out the timeline, like just from a place of like acceptance and like this is okay. Like I know that this is still going to work. I know that I'm going to get back to where I was. And it was a severe relapse in terms of like, I literally got back to like, I'm just going to spend my free time lying in bed because I hurt so bad. But after 2 months, it kind of like very quickly went away. And I got back to where I was before the theme park,
So you
you
kind
know,
of
when I,
picked up again
yeah.
as the pain receded, you picked up back to where you were.
And I said, this is information. I'm not ready for theme parks, and that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
and then, you know, I kept moving forward. I got to the point where I can wear like normal shoes, and that's fine.
So
Obviously,
after that
one,
theme park experience, I just want to ask you, you started going back slower again, right? You thought, okay, that was too big of a jump. So when you went, or did you just start building up slowly again after that, or did you start challenging yourself again?
I was after the 2 months of pain, I was able to kind of pick right back up where I was in terms of how far I could walk. Because when that flare was gone, it was gone. Like it didn't, you know, it stuck and then it just left and it didn't pop back up. Like it maybe had like flares on a smaller level sense,
Right.
but nothing severe like that. So I just kind of picked back up where I was. Obviously, one of my goals was running, and that was very not linear. So when I got to I can't remember when I got to the point where I would go out and run a little bit. Um, but for a very long time, I could run about a mile. And I, to me, a mile felt like, I mean, and I feel like when I talk to my friends who are runners, like what the first mile is the worst mile. Like it's not fun. Like you're not in the zone. You're not having a good time. And also I felt like even in my pain years before I found this work, like if I had to, I probably could have ran somewhere close to my, like it would have hurt, but
Yeah.
I could have done that. And I like running about a mile, it didn't really like you didn't switch to that like I'm a runner, I can, you know, keep like get into the zone, run. So I think for quite a few months my max was maybe like 1.2 and I'd go out a
You
few
built
times
that
a
up.
week.
Did you built it up just slowly over time
I
to get to that
I
level?
I did. Maybe I started at like around like a point 0.5 of a mile and built
Yeah.
up to like a mile and a quarter, but it was like it was very like some days I could do it and some days I couldn't. And you know, I was scared. And I think that
Yeah. And you were still having symptoms.
yes, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think I was probably like over interpreting just the feeling of my ankle on the ground as a symptom. Like I was really scared to run. But one day, like when my max was like at that point was a mile and a quarter, and it was in April of this year, so like a year and a half after I started working it, I went out and I like felt really, really good. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna get to 1.5. And I hit 1.5 and I felt really, really good. And I made it all the way to 2. And I felt like that was my goal. Like I don't ever want to be the person that's running like 10, 15 miles. Like that's not something that's on my radar. I wanted to be able to go out 2 to 3 days a week and run 2 to 5. So you get that like 20 to 45, you know, to an hour of cardio and you enjoy. It's just for mental health. It's not like I don't care about, you know, how fast I am or
Right.
building up. So once I got to 2, it showed me that I could have done 2 before. And it was like psychological and I was scared and I was like feeling breakable. So once I got to 2 miles, since then I do 2 miles around like 2 to 3 times a week. I do anywhere from like 2 to 3.5 miles. Like the max I've ran is 4, but I've only done that once. And I don't. It's not like yeah, it's not like I'm not really trying to build onto it at this
Yeah.
point. I just want to keep running 2 miles a few times a week. And on days I feel good, I let myself do 3. If I and like feel good, I don't really have pain. Like rarely
Amazing.
ever any
So you
pain.
can run now without really much pain, which is
Correct.
incredible.
Yeah, I don't have pain. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, you think about what you've been through and
Mhm. Yeah.
years, right?
Right.
Years of basically doing nothing, being in boots and barely walking,
Right.
and to go back to running with no pain, it shows you the system, right? You're most emotional over it. It shows your system can change, and it doesn't matter how long you've had it, it can shift. And I mean, you're living proof of that. Yeah. I mean, what does that bring up for you now? Just thinking about that, where you come from.
Yeah, it really, like you said, like the too good to be true. Like for so many years, I would have given anything to have this life that I have right now. And obviously, like after I had my son's my, number one thing in my life. But before I had him, and, after I had him, like number two is like, I want my mobility back. I want to be able to live pain free. Like there's no words. Like I literally, this is the life that I wanted and felt so impossible for so long. Like I would do anything to have this life, and it's out of reach and impossible. And I don't know why. And I went through so much trying to get it. And it was so frustrating and just like, very much like, why me? Like I'm just living life in my 20s, and all of a sudden I'm disabled without, like a name to it, and like just lost everything, lost my mobility, lost my ability to go out and live my life. And it's like, it was just who I was for 10 years. And like, it's gone. Like people will still ask me like, oh, do you need to sit down? And I'm like, why? Like,
Unbelievable. So
yeah,
it's just like a miracle in a way, even though it's not a miracle because it's
right.
neuroplasticity. But so
Yeah.
during, just to highlight to, it's an amazing, amazing story. Just to highlight to the audience, during that you did some writing, Nicole Sachs, but during that other time, like your main strategies, did you have daily practice, or was it more just the self-talk and looking for the evidence and then just getting slowly back to life? Is that your main
Yeah.
strategies?
Yeah, it was the self talk, like the belief. And I think one of the things about sharing stories like this is it can help someone connect that, right? And like those little pieces of like that, like the on ramp to belief, right? Like I believe that my pain might be mind body pain, and therefore I can fix it. But yeah, I did not have a daily practice. I wasn't like tracking my steps and building on slowly. I was already a journaler, so I didn't change anything there. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was
Were you
the self
journaling
talk.
throughout that time though? Were you journaling daily, or you just kind of did it for a period of time and stopped?
No, I started journaling. So I was a journaler in high school, actually, like religiously, and then I stopped. And I picked up journaling again when I separated in 2020, and then I found this like a year later. So by the time that I found Nicole's YouTube, I had journaled almost every day for a year already, and
Hmm.
I just kept doing it. So because I love to journal. Like I'm a good journaler. Like it's up there. It's up there with running. Like I enjoy it.
That's
So I
fantastic because a
didn't.
lot of people don't like journaling. They're very adverse to doing that.
Yes, yes. And I stopped, like I said, for a long time, but I was a journaler in high school, and like I just love it. So that part of it, like I was like, that probably it was a little bit easier for me. I was like, oh, I'm already doing this. I don't need to,
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
tell me twice.
So making so, but it sounds like, for recapping, because everybody's different, the things that really helped you, I mean, the journaling was good, but it sounds like it was more of just that mind shift that, look, you're not broken. It's not a physical condition, right? And that there's a possibility you can get back, that
Yeah,
you were just looking for the evidence and then continuing to go forward. And
yeah.
that's what shifted it the most. You feel like that's true?
I definitely do. And I mentioned this. I don't know if it had been earlier, right? Like if it had been back in like 2018 before I had already had these like mental health insights,
Yeah.
I might have needed the journaling because there was a long period of time where I wouldn't have believed. So I
Right.
do think like the journaling probably was helpful, and the mental health work and the, like self awareness and insight, it was probably necessary, but it doesn't feel like it was part of my recovery story because it had already happened.
Yeah,
Um,
you had made the connection, like that was the key,
yeah.
and you maybe you wrote about it, and you had made some life changes too. So there were some other things that really happened, right? You came out of that relationship, and that
Mhm.
opened you up, and
Yep.
so there was things happening outside of that, but you still had to do all the work essentially in your mind of breaking down this idea that your ankle and foot is broken, that there's something wrong with you.
Yes, yeah, and I think like so many different. I've read many, many books and watched many YouTube channels, right? And like one of the things would be like, like with the journaling, like the idea of like if you get to the insight and you hear what your pain is trying to tell you, but you still have a belief that there's something structurally wrong, the pain's not gonna go any like that's what happened to me, right? Because I had already had the insight, I had already, but until I believed that my pain was structural, it didn't do anything.
Yeah, so you believe it was
But
psychological, basically. It was mind. And so
yep,
the other thing too, I want to highlight for you, because people's recoveries, like you said, it's not a straight shot to the moon. It
yep,
took time, and you
yep,
had symptoms during that time, but it sounds like to me you did a really nice job of staying in your right mindset and new belief, even when the
yeah,
symptoms were up. You didn't say, oh no, I'm back. You didn't go down the rabbit hole again of thinking something broken in you, right?
yeah. No, once I believed, like once I believed, like because like that like circular, all of the doctors and I went to them and they all did the same thing, gave me the same diagnosis, gave me the same treatment, and then it didn't work, and
Yeah.
they just like throw up their hands and get annoyed with me. And I think that continuity of seeing that every single doctor would throw up their hands and get annoyed with me, like, oh yeah, this isn't orthopedic. I just, connecting that and seeing like all the different, science behind this work and all the recovery stories. It just like that, what, like, it was like a light switch. Like once I believed, and I was, yeah,
And then it's just a matter of, like you said, of time of getting back physically, building your
yeah,
confidence. And I think you highlighted another point is that as you start to improve, there's that strong fear that comes in, right? That it's going to come back or it's
yeah,
going to get worse. And I think I always feel we have to cross that bridge, that fear bridge, all of us, because there is that, and it means you're making progress, right? But
right,
there
yeah,
is that fear you're out running and going, oh, is it gonna come in? Is it gonna start on this step? Or, you know,
yeah, yeah. I think like that like hope, like being afraid to trust, and that like this is too good to be true, and I don't want to be crushed again. I had that early because like this worked and nothing had worked in so long. So like probably in that first like 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, like that fear is there that it's just a coincidence. And by the time it in the beginning, it was linear enough that I got to a place that my pain was less than it had been in 10 years consistently. And it stayed that way
yeah,
just in my day-to-day life. Like I'm still having pain if I want to challenge myself, but that level of day-to-day functionality and how low I got it, how long it lasted, I was like, this is, once I got to the point where I could just see this is different than anything else I've ever tried,
right.
and it has worked for longer than anything else I've ever tried. I think at that point it was really easy to just be like, well, flares are flares, and I can't
Yeah.
do theme parks yet, which I wanted to add, I have this year, so it was last year that I what had the Universal Studios, the whole mishap. I
Yeah.
have been to Disneyland twice this
Awesome.
year. Yeah, and no pain.
No
So
problem.
theme
It
parks.
just shows you don't give up. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm hearing from this. And it's taking you more time. So again, time. It's taking you some time. People out there understand that you had 10 years of this and you're
Right.
unwinding it, and
Mhm.
it's taking you a few years, right? And it's still a work in
Right.
progress. But you didn't
Right.
give up. You could have easily said, "Oh no, I'm never going to get back to that again." University student, and here you are going back to
Yeah.
it a year later.
Yeah. And it was, like I'm a different person than I was when I first had my pain and before I got divorced. But it was it was so it I did find it easy, and I could see if I was in a different place this wouldn't have been as easy, but I found it easy to focus on the positives, to be like, wow, I can do my own grocery shopping, and that, just to be thankful for that. And like,
Mm,
I can't run yet, but like, wow, I did, the Instacart, like they get the wrong things sometimes, and I'm frustrated because I don't have the ability to go, like, I can pick out my own groceries and I'm going to
yeah.
get the exact dressing that I want, and this is exciting. So just to focus on the
The
like
positivity, because
positive.
yeah, you've come from
Yeah.
such a low point that so in a sense, at this point, let me ask you this, because you're still, you're running up to like 2, 3 miles, 4 miles max. Um, in your mind right now, because you've had incredible recovery, do you believe that you could run more? I'm just curious because look at where you come from. Or is there still a fear that there's a limit in your mind? Is there a limit that you set on yourself?
I don't think that there's a limit. I think if I really wanted to run farther, I probably could. Um, I think that part of my hesitation is that, like, running injuries are a thing, and like, apart from like mind body issues, and I don't really want to take running to the level where I really put myself at risk of developing a real structural issue, just because I think I'm getting, like, out of my 3 mile run, I'm probably getting the same thing that I would out of a 10 mile run, which
Yeah.
is I get out there, I do the cardio, I enjoy it, I have the mental health benefits, and I don't really need more.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I'm a runner too, and I'm listening to your story going. I had a similar thing too, where I've gotten back to running now. I used to run marathons. I've run 10 marathons in the past, and I was a heavy runner, but I kind of stopped it, and then I had a hip issue and I didn't run. So I listen to your story and think of my own. And I run now like you for pleasure, and I'm not running for time, not running for crazy distance. I have like maybe 5, 6 miles. I don't really have a desire to go more. But what do you want? At least you could work on is this idea that yes, you could run as far as you want, but
Right.
if you wanted to, you don't have, right? But this idea, I
Right.
don't want you to, even now with your recovery, think that you can't because of the fear. I don't want that to be, because that's still limiting. I tell people wherever there's fear, you're still a limitation. And so I just want to put that out there because your story is amazing, but
Totally.
you could still. I work with a guy who is an ultra marathoner,
Hmm.
and he run 50-mile races, 100-mile races. And we would talk about it, and he said the body is freaking incredibly,
Right.
believably strong and resilient. So I just want to highlight that
Yeah.
don't let fear come in, because I don't think that's true. This wasn't a
Right.
structural injury to begin with.
Right.
But
Well,
anyhow,
yeah.
that aside, I
No,
don't want that. I just want to throw
no.
it out there. But
Yeah, no, that
your
probably is
recovery
fair.
is
There's like
so,
there is probably a fear of running a super long and something going bad. But I also, I like I also feel like I don't have any mind
desire.
body goals, in the sense that, like, I'm healed, like I got this, like this
Yeah,
was the thing, like this was what I wanted, and
right. You're
the
living a
fear.
good life. And in a way, like the other flip side is it's maybe it's healthier in a way because, like you said before, you were going pretty extreme or more extreme on the running because you felt like you had to,
Mm-hmm.
right? So your approach to the running now and to is different.
Yes.
It's a lot
Yes.
lighter on yourself. It's not as much pressure and
Yeah, yeah, I was afraid, one of the pieces which I mentioned, one of the awful things about what that experience was, like, I'm so afraid I'm going to gain the weight back. Like, that was one
yes.
of the fears, and that, like, weight maintenance is not like a thought. It's not a huge part of my running journey now.
Yeah.
It's just enjoying it. So,
See, that's the thing about these is so powerful with these stories and recoveries is that we go back to our lives in the same way, different though, but in a different way of thinking about it. Like the way you run now is so different from how you were thinking before. It's not filled with that fear and that worry and I have to do this and wait. So that all that stress is gone, it sounds like for you, and you're just enjoying life now. It's so awesome to see you're
yeah,
really enjoying
yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
So fantastic story. Really, really amazing. And do you have any last words for people who are struggling in their own way to overcome their conditions?
Yeah, I just think that when you like listen to these stories, everyone has like a different jumping on point. Like everyone has a different like key thing for that person that really like made it click, made it work, like led to, that on ramp to recovery. So I think like when you listen to stories, like it's really okay to just cling to the part that makes sense. Like find those little gems of like, this makes sense, this works, this like, and it's, not overthinking the, because my, like we talked about, my pain was so structural. You don't want to overthink and get tied up in those pieces of evidence that no, this isn't going to work. Like if you find those pieces of evidence that this could work, like really just taking what resonates the most to you and using that to like take off.
Yeah, yeah. And again, just to highlight your story, very, very physical, very, very structural story, and reinforced multiple times by doctors, right? Very mechanical in terms of, oh, I
Yep.
walk more, it's worse. I stand on my feet. And
Right.
to show that that was not that, right?
Yes.
You
Yep.
shifting your brain shifted your pain. And
Yep.
it's very powerful, I think, for people to think that, because it's easy to say, oh, yeah, the doctor said it didn't have anything and it was, but yours is very much like, very mechanical.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, like I know in the like Nicole's Facebook group, right? Or like, like Dr. Sarno said, tendonitis is TMS, like chronic tendonitis is a mind body issue. And that just can be really hotly debated. And people with issues like mine have a really tough time because that structural checklist, like everything on the this is structural,
Yeah.
but that's, if you think it's structural but it's not responding to the standard treatment for a structural issue, maybe it's not, maybe it's a story like mine.
Yeah. And also another aspect to your story that's it's important. I think it was very fixed in one area.
Yes.
Right? And that's another sign people will say, well, if it moves around, oh yeah, that's definitely, TMS pain. But yours was
It
kind of
didn't move.
fixated. And yet,
Yep.
so in a way that I also want to highlight that look, you had that too. It doesn't mean it's structural.
Yep, exactly. It didn't move. You MRI that part of the ankle. Here's where the tendon is swollen, and here's where it hurts. And the more you walk on it, you're gonna aggravate that. Like all of that. It just, yeah,
So it shows you the power of the brain to
yeah.
shift that. And it's an incredible story, very powerful story. I really thank you for coming on and sharing your success. I think we talked about one time maybe in
Yes,
person, one
yes,
session we had.
yeah. We had one session over Zoom. So I'm very like a rule follower. And when I started researching like what to do if you think you might have a TMS, one of the things on the checklist is like get a diagnosis, like have an external, like someone who practices mind body medicine, confirm this diagnosis to increase belief. So I Googled and I found you, and we had one appointment, and I chatted with you about, I already had some success. So I kind of was already bought in, but I recruited you as that external person to confirm my suspicions that it was a mind body diagnosis. So,
Yeah, give you a little more confidence to.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
another thing too for anybody out there who's struggling. Yeah, get an assessment from a mind body practitioner if you're not quite sure. You want that extra bit of reassurance to go over your story, and that can be very helpful for people to just give them the confidence to go forward. So
Yep. Yep.
awesome story. It's going to help a lot of people. Any parting words before we go?
No, just thank you for having me on. And I really hope that, people find this helpful. And I enjoyed chatting and enjoyed sharing. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's really powerful. So we'll catch up with you later.